ahead of styling our type here, I went ahead and indicated for myself where the subheads were, subheadings, and just gave them a different typeface and color. And I also pulled some content for a pull quote as well. And I added in source material. I forgot to include that earlier, so you do want to make sure that if you have an article that does have some source content, that you include that and then give it a necessary treatment later. So I've got all that set, and what I want to do first is get my styles created for this. We have, because of the two subheads, we have really three first paragraphs. And that's the one that initiates the article, and then of course the two following the subheads. With those, I don't want to put drop caps on all of them. You sometimes do see that where there are interior in-content drop caps. Typically I just like to have one on the entry to the article if I'm going to have one, and then the others I may do a different colored line, or you see different ways of treating it, but I don't myself really like the highlights that the drop caps make, and I don't think they're really necessary. For the most part, the intention of a drop cap is to be an entry into content, and even really just a decorative aspect at that. So I'm going to stick with the single drop cap on that first paragraph of the article, but with that, I'm not going to make it part of the style. If I was going to have drop caps throughout the article, then I would include that as part of the style. In this case, I'm not, so I'll just manually add it after. What I want to do before I create the style, and I'll just zoom in on this first paragraph, is check really the color of the type. And I'm not referring to the color of it as in black or red and so on. I'm more referring to the way the contrast of this typeface interacts, or the type interacts with the background for contrast. Minion, this typeface Minion, is actually quite good. It's very readable. It's very, it doesn't have any hot spots like a Baskerville typeface might. Baskerville puts these little dots within the content if you use it for body copy. So it's actually quite good, and the contrast ratio is fairly nice, but I still want to pull it back a bit just to show the process of doing that. So I'm going to highlight this first paragraph, and I'm going to go into my type color. And it's at 100% black now. Like I said, Minion is pretty good. We probably don't even have to change it. Some typefaces we would pull it back even to as far as 90%. Usually 95 is good, but I'll set it to 95 just so we can see the difference here. So I'm changing the tint of that black. Press return, and we can see, maybe difficult to see on your screen, but you can see a change, and it just sets it into the page a little more. That's a little gray, it's a little too gray, and that's because this typeface is quite good to begin with. So I'm going to highlight that again, and I'll just settle for now on 97, just so we're doing it, but it's not too gray. So that actually looks pretty good. And what that does with the type is it just takes out the harshness of that 100% contrast. The contrast ratio we have right now is essentially 100%. It's 100% black on 100% white. So it can be a little harsh on reading. So we want to set that type into the page a little bit, and that's how we do it. And we would do that before styling so that we include that in the style. When we create the styles, the intention is that we're creating them so that we can just travel through the content, click the style, and not have to do any manual formatting. So I'm going to do that again for the second paragraph as well. And it looks like it's ending there. I want to make sure that I see where it's ending. So of course the way we can do that, I'll select out, go back into my proper working mode, and I'll go to type, and show hidden characters. And then that's going to certainly indicate for me where the end of that paragraph is. Wherever those symbols are, that's indicating that everything that precedes it is a paragraph. So I know where to highlight to. So I'll do that. I'll highlight the second paragraph because while I'm thinking of it and doing it, I'm going to change the tint on that. And that's going to be a different style than the first paragraph because it's going to include an indent. So I've got my first two paragraphs set in with that tint change, and now I can save the style for the first paragraph. All I need to do in this case is just get my cursor live. As long as we know that this is all one paragraph, the cursor is live, and according to the program, it's basically selected that paragraph. If we're in there live with our cursor, we're working on that paragraph according to the styles. So we don't have anything else to do here. We don't need to add a first line indent. As I mentioned, we're not including a drop cap in the style. We'll do that manually after. So it's pretty simple. We've got a first paragraph style. I'll go over to my paragraph styles panel. And if you need to open that, again, it's in Window and down to Styles and Paragraph Styles. And I'll go to the flyout menu here and I'll choose New Paragraph Style. I'm creating a new paragraph style. And I'm going to call it First Paragraph, No Indent. And usually I do the no that way just for a quick visual reference. I can see no indent, and it comes from typesetting novels where I really do have to do a lot of first paragraphs, so it becomes just a helpful practice on my part. Now, if we were making any edits to this, we would go in and do them here if we were going to edit this style. And that's why we want to make sure that we're choosing to apply the style to the selection. We've selected this paragraph by clicking live into it, and we don't want to actually style that but not have it adopt the style that we've created. So I make sure that apply style to selection is created, and in this case we're ready to say OK. So I'll click OK. We've created that style and it's applied to that paragraph. I'm just going to close this that opened up. So now if I go to another paragraph, that would be a first paragraph, and we'll go down here to the one that follows this subtitle. I can click first paragraph, no indent, and it's going to apply that style to it. We didn't see much of a change because there wasn't really anything to change except that very light change in the gray. And then I'll do it here for now as well. So there we go. We've applied those styles. And now we can go through and do our interior styles that are going to include an indent. So I'll click in this as well. And now in this case, we're going to be including that first line indent. And a first line indent, typically, we don't really have a formula for it. It doesn't have to be a certain measurement. What we want to do is make it simply visible. The idea behind a first line indent in copy is so that we can discern that that's a new paragraph. Sometimes you see really the tab key will be used just to show the space. Well, that's incorrect. A tab isn't an indent, and it's far too much. It's just an unnecessary amount of space for an indent. So you don't want to be using the tab key. That's not a first line indent. We actually really want to just make enough that often in this size comes out to about 1/4 of an inch. So 1/4 of an inch is a common indent amount. And what I typically do, and is fairly common, is go by 3 characters on the next line. So in this case, we would go to about the S. We would bring it in that far. So I'm going to go into the style, and I'm not going to apply the first line indent and then create the style. I'm going to actually go and create the style, and within there I'm going to add the first line indent. So I'm clicked in here. There's nothing else we have to do. Color's fine, everything's fine. Justification, we may or may not add hyphens later, but if we do, we will add that in the style edit. So if we do have to go back and add hyphenation for whatever reason after we've looked at everything with first line indent, then we would go back and actually do that in the style edit. So I'm clicked in there. I've done my percentage of black. I've brought that back down to 97. So I'll go to the paragraph styles, new paragraph style, and this one we'll call body standard. And that's basically saying body standard. It's just the typical body copy with first line indent, making sure we have apply style to selection. And then we're going to go down in here to drop caps and nested styles. And because we're going to be setting the drop cap here, we want to make sure that we set preview. We turn preview on because we want to see how that looks. That will show us that we're setting it to the right characters. And in fact, we're not doing drop cap here, we're doing indent. So I will go to my indent and spacing. I chose the wrong one. And we're going to make sure that the indent, while we're doing the preview, the indent actually shows correctly. We see how much it's going to go in. So we want first line indent. We don't want left, but we'll see what this does just so you can see it. So left indent is going to do that whole paragraph. It's indenting the entire paragraph. We don't want that in this case. And space before, we're not doing paragraph spacing here. We're doing indents. And remember, if you're doing paragraph spacing, you're not doing indents. But space before is also the one that we do want to try to avoid using. Really, space after is what we want to use. And we'll get into that in more detail down the road in other tutorials. However, space before really is the one that we try very much to avoid using. In this case, we're doing the first line indent, so we'll set that and we'll just see that's not quite in as far as we want to go. That's one click. We'll go again, and that 1/8 of an inch. That's pretty good with this typeface and this content, those column widths. That's a pretty good indent. We're going to go just a little more. So that's just past 3 characters. So I think that's better. We're going in a bit more. We could pull that back if we wanted to land at exactly 3 characters, but I'm fine with that. The lesser amount, that's just a little too close to the edge there. It's not. We can certainly discern the paragraph, but for proper readability, we want a little more space, so we're going to settle there at 0.1875, and it's just landing beyond that 3rd character, so that's good. Everything else in here, we're fine. We know that it's all aligned to the baseline grid, and there's nothing else to change, so we'll say OK. And I'll just do Command 0 here to zoom out. So that is a pretty good indent for the first line. I would probably, if I was really working on this with serious time, I imagine I would eventually just pull that back a bit, just a little bit, but it's fine. So now I can go into my other paragraphs. I can just travel through this and I can click that style. And we're not having to do anything manually. That's our first paragraph. So you do want to have those hidden characters on so that you can see everything, making sure. So this has the style applied, and we'll travel down. There's basic paragraph. So you can see once it says basic paragraph, and I'm just clicked in here, then we know we can choose body standard, and body standard has been selected. So sometimes you're not seeing, you don't know if you're in a paragraph, so it's in the styles that will indicate. Now I'm in a spot that has basic paragraph again, and I'll choose body standard, and body standard to close that. So that's just our first set. And I would, of course, travel through and do the rest. And we see a few things that we're going to address later, but in terms of space and the subheads and so on. But I want to point out a couple of things. We saw when we had the basic paragraph chosen, so I'm going to just find one to choose here. I'll click in here. And actually, that's first paragraph, so let me try another. There we go. So you can see basic paragraph has been, that's what's applied because we haven't adopted a style on that content yet. And there's that little plus sign there. So what that plus sign means is that there's overrides added to the, in this case, to the default basic paragraph. If we saw that plus sign on any of this, that would mean that something was done to that content beyond what was part of the style. So for example, I'll go into a body standard paragraph here and I'll change the typeface to bold. So we can see that that little plus sign has been added there. That's indicating that beyond what the style has as attributes, something has been added manually and not adopted by the style. If I wanted the style to adopt that, if I wanted that bold to be worked into the style, I can right click on that and I can go redefine style. And what that will do is say, okay, I'll add that edit into the style, and everywhere you use that style, it's all going to adopt that. And in this case, everything would be bold. So we'll see if I do it. Of course, I don't want to do that, so I'm going to undo it, but that's basically clearing that override. So I'll undo that. And the other thing you'll see, and I'll actually be sure to undo that bolding there as well. The other thing you'll see is this icon right here. And sometimes that gets clicked accidentally. And I know that many students, they find that they're all of a sudden seeing this in their content and they don't know why. If you start to see this highlighting like that, you've probably clicked on the overrides, and that's basically just showing us where overrides have been applied to any styling, whether it's basic styling or overriding any of the content. So that little plus sign, this is the icon to show where that's happening. So I'm going to turn that off, but if you do ever see that, that's what it's indicating. And also sometimes we do want to use that. We want to know where are there overrides. One of the instances where I do use that is when I'm doing ebook development. And if I find that something isn't working correctly, or if there's a style applied and there's just things that don't behave correctly between the print versions and the ebook versions. We're of course always designing print to behave correctly in a digital environment, but this is something that really does help. That highlights where there may be issues. So I'm going to turn that off. And then the other thing with overrides I'm going to show you is sometimes we just want to clear them out. We want to clear overrides on anything. So right now in this case, I gave these subheads some color. I should zoom in on this for you guys. I gave it some color in a different typeface just to make them visible. And we can see a little odd thing there with the type. I don't know how it chose to do just part of the type in that, but what I can do there is just use my eyedropper and I can select where the type's proper and fix that. So in this case, we've got an override on the basic paragraph. We can actually just click into that content, right click and choose clear overrides. And that will take away the override that's been applied to that content. In this case, it was the typeface and color. It's not adjusting the size, obviously, but it took away those attributes. I'm just going to undo that for now so that I can still see that. So those little plus signs, they indicate the overrides to the styles. This icon will highlight where they're all happening. So I'm going to go up to my first paragraph now and do the drop cap. I want to do this manually. So I'm going to go to just the H there. I'll choose the trade Gothic typeface that I was using elsewhere in the article. And I'm going to set my drop cap up at the top here. So we're going to look up in our character settings. You should see your drop caps. And I'm going to travel down because I always keep it somewhere else down here because I typically use it in the styles. So right down here we can see we've got the drop cap and number of lines, and then we have the drop cap and adding more characters to that drop cap. So we'll see what this does. So I hit the number of lines. We of course want a drop cap. Typically we go 2 lines on average. And then if I want to do more characters, you can see that it will add all those characters. Well, in this case, I just want to do that single H. And then I can color this as well. So I'm just going to choose any color here. I'm not going to be too specific at the moment. So there's our drop cap. Of course, when I apply that, we can see that it's given us that override in the style. We've done something beyond the style. And then if I choose my highlights, we'll see it showing there as well. So it's showing that that paragraph has an override applied to it. That's not a problem. We decided we were going to be doing that manually, and that's the way it will stay for now.